Yeah, I've got to read those numbers. I didn't bring with me. Great. All right. We started our council's meeting this morning at 9:30, so we're going to go back in session. We'll reconvene and take up item number. I'm flipping over here. Thanks, Scott. All right, item number 36. At approximately 3 p.m., the Midland City Council will hold a public hearing at the Midland Center, 105 North Main Street, Midland, Texas, to discuss and receive public input on a proposed ordinance regarding the drilling and operating of oil and gas wells in the city limits and the city's extraterritorial jurisdiction. So I'd like to get us back in. We'll have a session, and I wanted just kind of open up with a few remarks. I really appreciate each one of you being here. It's heartwarming, actually, to see all of you. There is the one thing that I've thought about during this process, and we've been working on this for a long time, is that if we can constantly or continually being reminding ourselves that we're all Midlanders, and each one of us is interested in making Midland a better place. There is no doubt in my mind, in all the conversation that I've had with many of you out here, that is the overriding factor, that we want Midland to be better. And we may differ on our path to get there. So what I'm excited about seeing each one of you here is the fact that you'll be able to maybe hear a different path or a different perspective or have a different direction to get to that same goal of making a Midland a better place. So I would ask that if you are at the podium or you're sitting in the audience and someone says something or does something that's upsetting to you, please remember that that's what we're here about. And if a particular person is very passionate about an issue or a perspective, respect that person is really seeking what's best for Midland. So I want it to be open discussion. I want us to all listen well to each other, even perhaps put on shoes of the other person to feel what it's like to be in that position. Because really there are three different groups. You have oil and gas folks, obviously, or their bias may be more in oil and gas. You may have folks here that are more real estate leanings. They understand real estate a lot more than oil and gas, and oil and gas more than real estate. But then you have citizens here as well, and we're all citizens, and we're all seeking, again, what's best for our community. So when you want to take that bias, when you want to be in that position of, well, I know what's right, and that guy doesn't know what he's talking about, think about we're all Midlanders, and we're going to do our very, very best to find that. So with that, just a few little rules. We have a lot of people here and a lot of issues to cover, so we would like you to come to the microphone and give us your name and address for the record, and then you'll have about 3 minutes to speak. And if your points are not made in that 3 minutes, then let someone else perhaps make that point. If at the end of this public hearing, the points, say you had 5 points to make, and 3 of them you had time to do in that 3 minutes, and the other 2 you weren't, and then someone else probably could have similar points, so if they get up and say that, then you don't have to say anymore. If there is, at the end of the day, the point that you wanted to make hasn't been made and you've already spoken, I'll give you a chance to come back up and say it. So I want everybody to have the opportunity to say everything on their mind, again, being respectful of the other person and their ideas and viewpoints. But we're here to really make Midland a better place, and I'm very, very thankful for each one of you being here. The group, again, this started quite a long time ago. The past year, we've had some folks that have been incredibly generous with their time and have helped this a long way, and that's our oil and gas task force. And I would like to read you their names, and if they're here, please stand. I would like them to stand at the end. I would like to thank them by clapping. So Chuck Hedges was our chair. I do not think he is here today. Just keep him in your prayers, is what I'd like to say. Danny Campbell, he's here. I know. There's Danny. David Diaz, David's here. You guys please stand, and so everybody will recognize. Dempsey Taylor. I haven't seen Dempsey yet. I don't see him stand. All right. Don Sparks. Yeah, there he is. Here, Don. Jane Wolf, I saw her outside, so she's here someplace. There's Jane. Thank you. John James, one of our council members, participated in that. Karen York. There's Karen. and Tom Woodruff. Just thank each one of them for their hard work. They did a great job, and I'm very, very appreciative of what you've accomplished thus far, and I'm excited to keep going forward. All right, so I guess the way I'd like to go now is to open up the public comments. I've thought about what is the process, and I don't think we have defendants and plaintiffs or the bride and the groom or different groups. We're all in this one room together, so we can probably start like that. I don't want to have just this group going or that group going. I would like to do it just in an orderly fashion, and maybe I like change, but. I remember my days in school, all the guys in the front row got all the stuff, and I always sat on kind of in the middle. So I'm going to start with the group in the middle, and I'm just going to pick the third row. And if you're on the third row, which is Jad and Don on this side, you guys get to start. So if anybody is on that row that wants to speak, I'm going to change my mind. I apologize. I'm a change person. I'd like to open up with the task force because they have a presentation to make for us. Danny, Tom, I apologize to you guys. I'm jumping ahead of myself. I didn't follow my agenda. These are the two of the representatives of the task force. I would say Danny represented the oil and gas side, and Tom the surface development side. Although they both learned a lot about how each other works, so I apologize. I jumped ahead of them.
That's okay.
Danny, thank you.
We were willing for you to go right on.
Yeah, I figured you would.
No, we had asked just to get everybody on the same page of sort of where the process has come from this past year. Last September, the council appointed the task force that you have just heard about. We met the first week of October in 2008. We made recommendations to the council in May of 2009. Since that point in time, the city attorney and outside counsel, along with some of our help, has been redrafting amendments or redrafting the current drilling ordinance and some items to the subdivision development situation. We heard from a number of folks during that process, but it was a very difficult time because as anytime you take issues of this type, you have different sides and different opinions. And that was our whole deal, is we tried to carry back to the council something that could be drafted into a form that could actually end up where we are today, such that there was a good public forum so everyone could voice out. That was one of the main objectives through a number of things we went through where we had differences, and we did. As a task force, of course, there was different viewpoints in the room at different times of which way to go, and we had to make compromises at times. But the main purpose is to get something back in front of the council so the council could have a very good open forum and take input from there, such at this point, hopefully going forward via the council recommending to city attorney and outside council can redraft an ordinance. So we feel like most of that has been accomplished. We're now at the final stage of that, of hearing the comments today. So we look forward to it.
Thank you, Danny. This is Tom Woodruff.
Well, I'm not as good as Danny. I have to write mine down and read it, so y'all bear with me. But in the process of the task force, it's been my pleasure to serve on the oil and gas task force. And in the last year, we've listened to presentations from oil and gas, the residential development, and we've been counseled by the legal counsel of the City of Midland. We've investigated how other cities in Texas and across the nation are working with their drilling ordinances inside the city limits and outside their communities. In the beginning, the task force was a polarized group, about 180 degrees apart, split along the lines of oil and gas and surface development, and how to deal with the surface mineral development. Each issue was investigated and debated vigorously over a period of time. For each issue, mineral and surface, these considerations were taken into consideration, and that is, how can Midland protect its citizens' health, safety, and welfare? How can Midland provide for future orderly growth and accommodate mineral and surface development? How can Midland provide and protect its infrastructure expenditures? One very important point that I would like to make is that surface development, building a new subdivision, a strip shopping center, or an industrial site, or drilling a well inside the city limits is going to cost more money than it does outside the city limits or the ETJ. That's just the fact of life. Everyone on the task force believes that it will be in the city's best interest if oil and gas developers and real estate developers are required to work together as early in the process as possible to reach reasonable agreement with respect to accommodating one another's activities. So in considerations, as for the city council, as the city council considers the task force recommendations that are included in the ordinance and the public input today for the new oil and gas and subdivision ordinance, I'd like for you to keep this in mind. A drilling site is a surface development. A surface development is subject to a supermajority vote if 20% of the surface owners within a certain radius of that project object. A drill site as a surface development must operate under the same rules as any other surface development inside the city. Drilling must go through the city's platting process, including staff review and planning and zoning. The city planning and development should require drilling and developers to work together on this. Locations should be limited where possible, and drilling should pay for a portion of the public improvements in that area. The Texas Railroad Commission, as we understand it, currently has established 1 well per 80 acres as a standard. The Railroad Commission also allows for movement of a well site several hundred feet one way or another based upon certain criteria. The city's legal counsel cites law that puts the city in a defensible position from regulatory takings if the oil operator can access certain portions of its drainable oil reserves. That means the city can deny a well permit under certain circumstances and conditions. It also means that the city can ask that a location be shifted to accommodate certain items. And we also found that the city can regulate drilling activity in the ETJ. As a task force member, I will be opposed to any changes to the proposed ordinance that change the intent of the task force recommendations. But as task force members, Danny Campbell and I have discussed several technical and administrative tweaks that we feel like that need to be addressed to make the new ordinance work best for everyone. And I know Danny Campbell and I will be available at the council's pleasure to assist the city attorney and legal counsel, including any of these technical and administrative tweaks that you desire.
Very good. Tom, thank you very much again for your work. All right, and if we could, I'll go back to my third row, and if Secretary Evans or Jad, anyone on that row, if you want to speak, will you raise your hand? And okay, go ahead and start. And then
first, let me say that I think it's very constructive.
Oh, yeah, if you'll give us your name and address,
Okay.
I apologize.
My name is Jad Davis. I'm with Davis, Gerald, and Kramer, and I've been hired by Patriot Resources, an oil and gas operator that is impacted by the proposed ordinance. What other companies may be assisting them pay my bills, I don't know, but I do know about them. If I might ask, Ben Shepard with the Permian Basin Petroleum Association is here, and I think it would be, I know he has some comments to make, and if I could ask the council's permission, I'd like for him to go first.
Okay, that's fine with me. I was just trying to figure out some way to orderly do it, and obviously it didn't work. So you can override me anytime you want. Yeah, Ben, if you'll just introduce yourself, please.
My name is Ben Shepard. I'm the Executive Vice President of the Permian Basin Petroleum Association, an organization that since 1962 has advocated for the oil and gas industry in the entire Permian Basin, West Texas and Southeast New Mexico. We currently have about 700 member companies, and those companies represent thousands of employees and family members, many of whom live right here in the City of Midland. I I appreciate the opportunity to go first. I do have some general comments I'd like to make, and I think Mr. Davis and perhaps some other attorneys in the room can maybe address some of the more specific legal comments that we all may share. I want to start out by commending the task force and the council for tackling these very tough issues, and over the last 2-3 years, really knuckling down and wrestling with some pretty contentious issues. We fully recognize that the city has the right to regulate safety and health and orderly development as it pertains to orderly development of the community. However, my group has voted to oppose this ordinance, this proposed ordinance as drafted. With that being said, we are very much in favor of an ordinance, and we are very hopeful that we have the opportunity to bring some of our specific comments forward and work towards a solution. We feel like that our comments would be helpful, bringing both sides together. Obviously, you had oil and gas representatives on the task force, but we feel like there are a number of points that my group feels like a number of our points were not addressed in an acceptable fashion, in our opinion. I'll just say that every morning when I get up at 6 a.m. to go get the paper with my 6-year-old daughter, we live out on the northwest side of town, and we can see 6 or 7 pumping units. And as far as being a citizen of Midland, we feel pretty excited to see that. The oil and gas has been very good to the City of Midland and continues to be very good to the City of Midland. I think our main general concern with the ordinance is that it appears to be presumptuous against the oil companies and puts the oil operators on a defensive in a number of ways, whether it be increased time constraints that might affect leasing arrangements, increased costs, or as was mentioned before, stepping on what we believe is stepping on the toes of the Railroad Commission when it comes to spacing. Again, those legal arguments I won't address. I'm getting the hook over here for time. I think I'll leave it at that, and I appreciate the opportunity in it. And the PBPA stands ready to assist in any further developments.
Thank you very much. All right.
Jad Davis again. One of the things when we look at regulating the oil and gas in the City of Midland, it's got to be realized up front, is I've heard various estimations, but the net present value of a section of land developed at 40-acre density is about $32 million. And there are a lot of people in the room that have that. And so because it is valuable, early on, when hints of a draft of an ordinance was coming out, I think a prudent businessman would ask, we need to get some legal counsel in case something comes out we can't live with. We need to find our options, etc. And that's what my client has asked me to do. And rather than sort of keep me in the cage until y'all pass something, they've asked me to share with you what, from the perspective of a litigator, the current ordinance, if we were going to file suit, what we would do. And I think it would be prudent for the council to ask your own council, where are we on thin ice? And I think the first place you're on thin ice is trying to extend regulation of use into the extraterritorial jurisdiction of the city. I think if you will counsel with your council, I think there's a very poor case to be made that the city has the ability to regulate use outside the city limits under the statutory authority. I'd ask y'all to look at that. The second thing is constitutionally under the Texas Constitution, and I read an old case, a 1930 case, before coming over here. The Texas Railroad Commission has forever been given the exclusive authority to regulate well density in Texas. Here's the thing, in the City of Midland, it may well be that 640 acres, there would be nowhere on that 640 a well could go for health and safety concerns. And there may be other areas within the city limits where 20-acre density wouldn't bother anybody. If the council were to leave the spacing regulation to the Railroad Commission, and then if there's a health and safety issue with respect to a particular location, I think that's when the city needs to act. And that's where your taking is, and that's where your inverse condemnation suit is going to come, is in the spacing. If you'll leave that to the Railroad Commission, you can gut the private lawsuits. And then finally, and I got the hook too, but I do think it's important because I think we come here with the right attitude. I mean, I'm not saying on behalf of my client that we might sue. I'm telling you it's a given, it's a promise. In the current condition of the ordinance, this city is going to write some checks that it can't cash. This spacing is a big issue. And the second area, and I know I've got the hook,
Yeah, you're close.
but do you want me to sit down or do you want me to just give you 10 more seconds?
10 seconds. I'll be graceful.
The ETJ is a big, you're going to get sued immediately on that. And the second one is the spacing, and the operators are going to pick the best test cases on which to take to the courts. I mean, that's what's going to happen. I will tell you this, the courts also is the place, a lot of the things you have in the ordinance is trying to regulate the private rights among private property owners. The courts are set up for that. The City of Midland needs to regulate health and safety and let the courts fight it out among the land use and the commission set the spacing. And that's my view of what you should do.
Thank you, Jan. Appreciate it. It's pretty impressive for a lawyer to speak 3 minutes and sit down, so thank you. Mr. Dunham?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Councilman. My name is Richard Dunham. I reside at 4701 Island Drive, and today I'm here representing the Permian Basin Home Builders Association here in your local community. My membership constitutes about 186 members, Mr. Mayor, 58 of which are active home builders. The remainder are some way involved in supporting the home building business. Like the earlier speakers, first let me just thank the task force because they did put in a lot of time. And having known many of them and knowing of the rest, I know that they are all personally invested in our community and have our community's interest deep in their heart, and I know their decisions and comments and work was deeply thoughtful. First of all, I've been asked by my membership to express to the council that we do believe in the planning process here in Midland. As part of developers and home builders, we come under that regulatory process that the city has developed. We believe that it is important for the City of Midland to have such a process to support orderly growth of our city and actually to maximize not only the value to the city and its citizenry, but also the quality of life issues that we enjoy around here. I will say that for our membership, we don't fully support we don't like everything that's in the two proposed ordinances, but we will support the final product that the task force has brought forward. We are willing to work and try to operate as builders and developers under the proposed regulations that are being proposed. While we'd like to see changes, while not everything in there was as we had recommended or asked, we think it's a very useful step in the right direction. We would encourage you to go ahead and enact something very similar to what has been prepared by the task force. You know, I think some would probably suspect that we are very anti-oil in this town. Let me say that that cannot be the case. We have a deep respect for the oil and gas industry, and we understand as developers and builders that the health of our community flows from the oil and gas business here in our community. And as builders, most all of our clients are either directly working for oil and gas companies or in some way supporting those oil and gas companies. So we realize what the industry brings to our area, and we just want to try to find some ground where we can work together in that process. Finally, Mr. Mayor, let me say that we actually do have 4 proposed things that we would like the the council or the task force to look at. We think there's 4 areas that can perhaps clarify some of the wording in the ordinance, and we do have one request of the council. I'd be pleased to pass along these 4 comments for your consideration or the task force consideration, and would just like to say that the one request we have is, if there are changes to be made, because I think we understand what are in the current proposed ordinance, if there are changes to be made, that we would let the task force review those and make sure any proposed changes actually do meet the intent of the task force and doesn't perhaps go against some of the proposals or ideas that they wanted to incorporate. And with that, Mr. Mayor, that is all that I would like to
Thank you very
say
much,
at this
Mr. Dunham.
point. Thank you.
Appreciate you. All right, anybody else on that row? Yes, sir.
I'm Walter Pate of Pate & Associates Architects, 4500 West Illinois. And my comments will be very brief.
Thank you, sir.
It's obvious that the discovery and production of oil in the Permian Basin has been has caused a great economic growth in Midland. And Midlanders owe much to the oil industry, the petroleum industry. We are all in the oil business, whether that's how we actually make our living or not. And yet it's the people, the men and women of vision, who have made Midland a great place to live, a great place to raise a family, a great place to come back to and stay, a great place to call home. Men and women of vision, names like Scarborough, Cowden, Hogan, Faskin, Davis, Coleman, Abel, and others have led Midland to its greatness, to where we are now. Without these and hundreds of other leaders, Midland would not be the unique place that it is. Instead, Midland could be a lot like cities that we see 20 to 50 miles west of here, or 40 or more miles east of here. But it was men and women of vision with a progressive pioneer spirit, with a can-do spirit. They've made the difference in Midland. Their efforts are reflected in the very fabric of our city, resulting in fine neighborhoods with great schools, in comfortable homes, in a thriving city with facilities and institutions that we all enjoy. It was in 1928 that Clarence Scarborough built a 150-room hotel. In fact, it was across the street. It became the place to stay in Midland. Hundreds of oil deals were struck in that hotel. And why was it built? Because Mr. Scarborough had a vision for Midland of what it could be, and it is. In 1929, Senator Thomas Hogan and his son Fred built a 12-story office building in downtown Midland. And for a short time, it was used to store hay. But it proved to provide essential office space for an exploding oil industry. Why did he build it? Because he had a vision of what Midland could be. Paul Davis and $15 million worth of bonds, a huge amount in those days, the proceeds of which expanded Midland's water supply. And there are others. I encourage you, I believe that you all, this council, is made up of men and women of vision. I encourage you to support both of these ordinances. Maybe they do need to be tweaked, but I think they're excellent. We've spent some time with them. I encourage you to support them both. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pate. All right, anybody else on the third row there? On this side? All right, we're going to go to the second row. Anybody on the second row? All right, yes, sir.
My name's Mike Rhodes. I live at 4208 Greenville Drive, and I'm here today on behalf of Henry Resources, and I'd like to make a few brief comments, and I'll break my discussion up into 3 areas. First, we too would like to thank the City Council, the City of Midland staff, including Keith Stretcher, Cameron Walker, Courtney Sharp, and the task force for their willingness to work through these tough but important issues. Second, I'd like to discuss our changes that we have to the proposed ordinance. We've identified 29 separate changes to the proposed oil and gas ordinance and another 3 that are related to the planning and development, or the ETJ ordinance. We've provided a list of those 32 changes as well as their justification to the city manager, city attorney, the city's planning division manager, and to the city council members. And I'm presenting the city with this document containing those changes, and we're recommending that the city council consider amending the proposed oil and gas ordinance using these modifications.
Okay. Thanks, Mike.
Third, I'd like to express our opinion as to the broad philosophy that the city council might consider when adopting or modifying an oil and gas ordinance. I've got 5 points to make here. Number 1, the council in any ordinance it adopts should work to protect the public. Number 2, the council should remain neutral to the extent that it can in matters involving private property owners. When private property owners are unable to resolve the disputes on their own, as Mr. Davis suggested, then the city might consider deferring to state courts and case law precedents who have decided on these matters for decades. Point number 3, we'd hope that the city council would build on state laws and regulations when developing an oil and gas ordinance that applies to Midland. The Texas Railroad Commission, as published on its website, is the primary agency in Texas having jurisdiction over the oil and gas industry. We would ask that you carefully consider any modification or change that deviate from established regulations so as not to unduly expose the city to significant damage claims that all the citizens of Midland would have to bear. Our 4th point is we'd ask the council to consider the cost benefit of any provision that has a significant cost of compliance. As an example, a hypothetical example, take a person who's building a $300,000 home here in Midland, but has to pay an extra $60,000 to his house to comply with city-added regulations pertaining to aesthetics and safety. And then imagine his frustration when, after all his money's been spent, including the extra $60,000, he realizes his house is no more pleasing to the eye and it's really no safer. And in many respects, that's what the proposed ordinance requires of operators. Last point, point number 5, would ask the council to consider local examples where oil and gas development coexists with surface development. Right here in Midland, we have an active well within a couple hundred feet of the BMW dealership, the Marriott Hotel, and the Clear Springs restaurant. People are building homes just north of Mid-City's church, just west of town here, in the middle of an active oil and gas development. Even in Odessa, there's an oil well in the middle of the soccer complex right outside of UTPB, and there's a well in the parking lot at the mall. People have said that houses and buildings and businesses won't locate near oil development, but our facts and experience say otherwise. We recognize that there are many disparate views that the City Council is hearing, and we'd like to thank the council in advance for considering our proposed changes to the ordinance.
Thank you very much. All right. Second row. Anybody else? All right. Yeah, Mr. Payne. No, go ahead, Michael. Thanks. Yeah, and I may try to speed this up a little bit so we don't just have a long wait. And I remember we did this one time a couple years ago. We had everybody lining up in the middle of the aisle like they're going to communion at church. But we may do some of that just to speed it up so people don't have to wait too long in between the people getting up. So, Mr. Payne, thank you.
Mark Payne at 1205 Breckenridge. I guess I'd like to start with...
Yeah, we can't hear you very well. Is it maybe...
Mark Payne.
Is the
Just
mic
turn me
working?
off. Is it?
Yeah, I think you might just have to get a little bit closer.
Yeah, my name is Mark
Or
Payne.
just the stand a bit. It's easy for me to say sitting down here. All right, sir, thanks.
Mark Payne at 1205 Breckenridge.
Perfect.
I guess to start with, I'd like to address the turning it over to the private property owners. There's truly is a pecking order when it comes to these issues. Obviously, the Texas Railroad Commission and the state of Texas is at the top of that. After that, in the county or outside of the city, it would be the middle developer, and at the bottom of that is the surface developer. Anybody that's dealt with an oil and gas company in that situation understands that quite well. And that's what oil and gas is used to dealing with. There is somebody in the middle of that, which is the city, the municipality. A lot of times there's people say, let's send you away and go let the two of us work it out. That's much like letting your 15-year-old son negotiate with your 7-year-old daughter. They're going to come back and have decided that what he wanted to do is what they want to do all the time. If you sat down with them, you may find out there was some other things discussed while they were sent away. So I would encourage you not to do that. If you do, you just as well let oil and gas write the ordinance or lay it out. There's talk about whether the city's trying to regulate density. We're really not talking about density, not the downhole density. What we're talking about is regulating the surface. What density you're able to regulate or access your minerals. You're welcome one site. I don't think anybody's ever talked about saying that you can't, limiting your mining the minerals to 40 or 20 or 80 acres. Planning and zoning regulates where you can put apartments, where you can put the car washes, and where you can put oil wells. That's part of the city's function. We've talked about vision and dream and talking about other cities. Is it feasible to lay out a subdivision that would work and be tolerable at 40-acre spacing? Yes. Would it be desirable? No. I don't think you'd find very many people that come in and say, yes, that's desirable. At 80-acre spacing, certainly it's feasible to lay it out and design it. Is it tolerable? If that's my choices, yes, it would probably be tolerable. Is it desirable? No. At 160 acres, is it tolerable? Certainly more tolerable than 80 and even more than 40, and possibly starting to get desirable. As Midland tries to sell itself, yes, I do think the oil and gas industry. I've been in business for 22 years and know a lot of people that I'm in contention with right now that I respect tremendously. But we're trying to sell the neighborhoods. We're talking about a neighborhood. And I really want Midland's neighborhoods to be desirable, not just tolerable. And for now, I'll close with that.
Thank you, Mr. Payne. Appreciate it. All right, anybody else? Isn't that ready? All right. I'm going to jump to the first row. Anybody on the first row? All right, I'm going to just start. Okay, go ahead, sir. Yeah, thanks. Okay. Pictures are worth 1,000 words. So we'll cut you down to 1 minute. How's that work? I'm joking. I apologize.
My name is Vern Disney. I have property on 8312 Glasgow.
Can people in the back hear me okay? You're having a hard time.
My name is Vern Disney.
Thank you.
I have property at 8312 Glasgow.
Yes, sir.
And we've met with the Homeowners Association, and there's many people out there that feel the same way. And there's many of us, myself included, that base our livelihood on the oil and gas industry. And so we always know there's a balance. There's a balance between the oil operators and also the surface interest owners. And what I wanted to include here was just an example of there's at least one operator in Midland that is not capable of self-policing. And there's many pictures in here that are not only aesthetic but about health and safety issues. And so we applaud the efforts that have gone forth in drafting the ordinance, especially in lieu of potential litigation. One of the biggest points we have is this looks fairly pleasing for new drill sites, and it seems somewhat ambiguous for existing well sites. And so that is our first question that would appreciate a yes/no answer in front of this group. Does this include existing well sites?
The short answer to the question is no, this doesn't. The ordinance does not address existing wells, but those were drilled under prior ordinances that may be not in compliance with those ordinances. So it's possible that we will step up. Well, I wouldn't say it's possible. It's probable that we're going to step up our efforts to enforcement. And I don't know that personally if we've done a good enough job on that. So the short answer is no, this ordinance does not tackle existing wells, but we have not done a great job enforcing the current ordinances or the ordinances that those wells were drilled under. And we've had some discussion about how we will do that, fees, et cetera. So.
Okay.
It's a good question.
Well, I think that the existing well site probably serves an example of what will happen without regulation. And one of the questions I had was, would a $500 fine deter any operator anywhere to do anything they want, knowing that they can always get a well permit without your objection?
Yeah, there are some details like that, and that may be one of those things we could sit down and talk one-on-one, but they're good, great questions to ask. And I don't know, does anyone want to really answer it? It's really going to be difficult if we start having to have this kind of a conversation because it's a lot of detail. But I can promise you from a policies level, we're thinking about that and recognizing that we're going to have to do a better job in enforcement. And most of those things have to go back to how much does it cost to do those. So I promise you we are looking at it.
Okay, there
And
was
thank you
one
for sharing
item
these things.
in there about on a recompletion permit that that the well would then fall under this new ordinance. It seems somewhat ambiguous. At what point is the city notified? Because it seems like it's a railroad commission issue on permitting. At what point would the city actually get involved after a new drill is, on an existing well?
Okay, I don't know. That's a good question to ask, and I'm glad you asked it, and we will get it answered.
Well, I
If
guess
the recompletion will trigger the new ordinance or not, that's your question.
yes, sir.
Yeah, we'll get that answered.
Okay.
Good question.
And really, that's all I had. And just really more than anything, I think the pictures, and I'll hand out more brochures to anybody that really self-regulation doesn't appear to be a workable scenario within the city, at least with one operator. So that's
Okay.
all I had.
All right, thanks. All right, fourth row. Oh, Kyle, do you have something? Okay, he's on the first. Yeah. Oh.
I've got 5 pictures.
All right, that'll work. You get 2 minutes.
Lots of presents.
Did I skip some folks in the second row that wanted to speak? I'm moving pretty quickly.
Thank you.
I don't know, would it?
My name is Kyle Womack, 5713 Heartland. I guess I'm here, I'm not representing really anybody other than maybe what I think is the citizens of Midland. And as has been expressed, the protection of the quality of life that we have here. And I'm more of a visual person, so sometimes I think we get bogged down in looking at a very micro level of what effect this has on the community. And we talk about 40-acre spacing or 80-acre spacing. And so I prepared a map that I've handed out to you, and it shows the entire area of Midland. The spots shown in red are from the Railroad Commission, and those are the existing permitted drill sites around Midland. And as you can see, there are very few within the city of Midland. Most of that development has happened to the south and the east of Midland. And I would say the vast majority of that I looked is really on 80-acre spacing. The Wolfberry, as I understand it, trend covers, technology has allowed that to expand quite a bit over what has happened in the past. And from maps that came out of the task force, that area covers about 6,000 square miles. And now, for the first time, has encompassed a lot of the northwest part of Midland, clear out past the airport and north of Midland, as well as to the south. I think if you put that in perspective, the area that Midland is really trying to deal with are these high growth areas that affect, even with the half-mile ETJ, about 30 square miles of this 6,000 square mile play that is being looked at. And I want to just put a little bit of perspective on that. Historically, Midland goes up and down, but Midland absorbs somewhere between about a half of section to
Well, that's annoying.
as much as a section and a half of land per year for the growth that we've seen over the last 20 or 30 years. And if you look at the land that's available within the city limits, you know, we probably have maybe a 5 to 10 year growth, maybe a little bit longer, depending on growth, with the current supply of the city of Midland. Yet all of the Midland's planning efforts, as we look for water to go out 100 years, we look for our water and sewer plants to go out 30 to 50 years. We look at transportation to go out 30 and 50 years. We look at community growth and where we think those neighborhoods are for 30 or 50 years. Then I went back to the same map and said, what if we go to 40-acre spacing? And you can see the impact that that has on that map. And what if we go to 80-acre spacing? And I think it's important to say that's surface spacing, not necessarily drill completion spacing. Either one of those scenarios is going to drastically affect the ability of the City of Midland to grow much bigger over the next 20 to 30 years unless we completely rethink how we're building our neighborhoods. I think with an 80-acre surface spacing, it might be possible, and I think the task force, I would support what they've done. If there's a cooperative effort, it's probably possible to plan, and I think the secret of that is in the planning of both sides of how to do that. But even at an 80-acre surface spacing, that affects over 25% of the surface area of that section. At a 40-acre spacing, you're beginning to affect 40 to 45% of the surface area, not including what's needed for right-of-way and other city infrastructure. I think just as a summary, I would say I'm very supportive for the most part of what the task force recommendations have been. I was able to sit in on some of those discussions, and I can tell you that they worked long, hard hours debating both sides and trying to really find something that protects the health and safety of Midland and the ability for this city to grow in the future. And at the heart of that argument, I think, is planning. It's going to take cooperative planning, and the city is the agency that's going to be able to make that happen. Developers are going to have to set aside drill sites, and they're going to have to work with the mineral interest owner to develop that. But I think quid pro quo, the mineral owners have got to understand, especially in these high growth areas, they're going to have to be a player to plan for development. That needs to be a public process, and they need to be a part of planning for this community's future. I've heard people say that that's going to be onerous and expensive. The map that I provided you with, that you're talking about with the confines of this ordinance, would support over 300 new wells at an 80-acre surface siting spacing. Now, if those wells are worth $7 million apiece, they represent over $2 billion as an economic engine, which is invaluable. But it's hard for me to understand why a small part of that investment, and we're talking a very small part for planning, isn't reasonable, prudent, and absolutely necessary to make sure that the surface development and the mineral development can coexist in this community. Thank you.
Thanks, Kyle. That's good. All right, second row. I'm going to change a little bit. If you want to get up and speak, just get up to the mic, and we'll just kind of get people lined up. Try to keep about 3 or 4 people in the queue. So, second row. All right, let's just go to the fourth row, and then it's kind of free reign after that. because I know there'll be some folks in the back that may want to speak, and it may be 3 o'clock in the morning tomorrow morning before you get here. So, no, I'm joking. It hopefully won't be much longer, but go ahead.
My name is Trip Long, and my address is 2112 Berkeley, Wichita Falls, Texas. And I'm here representing Windsor Energy from Oklahoma City, and we own 6,000 acres of leases around the airport. And I want to make a quick rebuttal to this idea of planning. I'd like to come back up and make a few more comments if I could later, but I'm kind of a nerd. I just happen to be reading this book, and I thought, why don't I look in here for a quote that might make sense. And you got to realize that we're talking about private property. We've witnessed in the last decade Hugo Chavez get elected by a popular majority in Venezuela and then take private property, convert them to collective farms. This is a quote from Adam Smith, written in the 18th century. The statesman who should attempt to direct private people in what manner they ought to employ their capitals would not only load himself with a most unnecessary attention, but assume an authority which could safely be trusted to no council and senate whatever, and which would nowhere be so dangerous as in the hands of a man who had folly and presumption enough to fancy himself fit to exercise it. And I think really we need to address the people that have bought the minerals, bought the surface, and ask them if they think that the city council is more fit to do what they want to do with this property.
Very good.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. All right.
I'm Dale Brown. I live at 3804 Trinity Drive here in Midland.
Mr. Brown.
And I guess I represent a reasonably large family and a couple of businesses that we work with here in Midland. It is a great blessing to be in an area where the natural resources provided by our Creator are the base of our economy. It's wonderful to give credit to the talented and resourceful people still today who are the key to capturing value for our community and our society from these resources. But we will suffer if we do not keep in focus that the oil and gas which sustain our economy are gifts and not the results primarily of our own achievements. We have a responsibility to be good stewards of what God gives us, and when it is our good fortune to have a valuable asset that has great potential to add to our tax base right here inside our city limits, we should treat them with respect. We should also see that as benefactors of the community those who are willing to invest, to realize the benefit of the resources, and add value for the good of all. We have a precedent for incentivizing business development investments in our community, and our community has even passed a special tax trying to encourage people, being allies to people who would make investments in our community. And clearly there's wisdom in requiring people that are making these investments to behave in a responsible way, but to consider them as intruders or even criminals, even before they've been irresponsible, is not the West Texas friendly way that's been a calling card for our region for a long time. I would encourage you to serve these citizens well, as other taxpayers of our city have rightfully come to expect. Be sure that the ordinance that you finally pass puts our community on record as an ally for anyone who would invest here to create value for the benefit of our school children and for others who have the privilege of calling our city home. Thanks to each of you, Jerry and Michael and Luann and Wes and Scott and Vicki and John, for the ways that you give generously to benefit our community. And I realize that you're dealing with some tough issues here that can be divisive, and you risk making enemies, offending all of your friends, if not at least some of them, as you wrestle with the issues that are involved here. And my prayer is that you'll have wisdom and for harmony as you deal with these. Thank you very much. God bless you.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. Thank you. Appreciate that. Thank you. Yeah, we do this for the money, really.
Yeah.
Mike?
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
My name is Mike Wallace. I reside at 200 Blackberry Circle. I'd like to thank the mayor and the other council members for the opportunity to make some comments about the proposed oil and gas city ordinance. I know there's been a lot of energy spent on it, and we certainly appreciate that. I have a lot of comments that have already been said, so I'll probably skip around a little bit.
Thank you very much. We appreciate
Make Wes
that.
happy. I'm a petroleum engineer. I've spent most of my career in the Permian Basin for companies like Burlington Resources, ConocoPhillips, currently independent, and an equity owner in a number of operating entities here. I speak both as an operator who owns leasehold in the city, as well as a citizen who's concerned about the potential liabilities that the council will be exposing to its taxpayers with such an onerous and costly ordinance. I'm very disappointed that Midland seems to be on the verge of adopting an oil and gas ordinance that is so anti-industry, costly, and restrictive. Even though Midland owes its existence to oil and gas, as others have said, the council may possibly make Midland the poster child for red tape, expense, and restrictions as it relates to oil and gas amongst cities in Texas. It's flabbergasting how we got to this point. Many of us in the industry believe the proposed ordinance intended to be so punitive to the oil and gas operators that limited drilling is the intended result. Assuming that's what happened, please know that this will translate into punishment of the mineral owners as well. Frankly, the mineral owners are the real losers here, and nobody seems to be talking about their rights. Keep in mind that the mineral owners are usually individuals, average folks, typically not an oil company, that own property who want to work out an arrangement with an operator to access their property and monetize the value. Sometimes the mineral owners are foundations or trusts like the YMCA, Casa de Amigo, Manor Park, museums, etc., that benefit greatly from royalties that usually have been donated to them. Believe it or not, there are significant positives to having development in the city. There will be significant tax revenue. I mean, we're not even asking for a tax abatement like you may give to other industries that come to town someday. With the city having significant monetary issues now, one would think the tax revenues would be welcome. There will be significant contributions to employment on the operator side and the service company side. There will obviously be a trickle-down effect such that when people have money, they spend it. I think that's all good for Midland. I was going to say something about Midland's history, but we talked about that. Back to the ordinance, there's clearly not enough time to discuss in detail all the points within the ordinance and personally my objections. I respectfully request that you guys find a way to go back to the drawing board and make another attempt to protect the relative rights of the mineral owners and loosen the red tape for prudent development inside Midland, or model Midland's ordinance, one that's already works well, such as the City of Lubbock or Odessa. I realize the city has a duty to its citizens.
That's not your fault. I don't know.
I realize you guys have duty to citizens for orderly growth, but many of us believe, as it relates to oil and gas, the city should focus its attention on health, safety, and environmental issues. I say this mainly to the fact that the mineral estate has dominant rights to their property over the surface owners. I believe, though, that we can all coexist within the city. There were 38 requirements. I had comments to most of those. I'm not going to go through those in the interest of time. And just to kind of end, I think I speak for many others in the room who have numerous objections to the proposed ordinance. I believe that going forward, there should be some forum to work through each of the line items. And the bottom line is that without major revisions to the proposed ordinance, I believe it's inevitable that multiple and significantly large monetary lawsuits are a certainty for the City of Midland, and that's the last thing the city needs. I think, as the gentleman before had said, that if you look around town, we already have a fair number of oil and gas wells in the city limits, and I'm interested in hearing how these have been harmful to the city. Thanks again for your time.
Mike, I want to make a suggestion, and to everybody else here too. Our email is listed on the Midland, Texas, spell out texas.gov. And if you have, further items that you want to get into detail, and feel free to email us.
Okay.
Because, that's what we're here for, is to listen to everybody here. And we've gotten some good emails already from our citizens, which I appreciate. And I'd like to hear more from you if you've got details.
Mr. Mayor, my contribution today will be to, if you come up to the podium, turn off your mobile phone, because my past industry tells me that's what the interference is.
Oh, good to know.
Yeah, that's it. Do look like what I did today. Throw your cell phone in the toilet. That's what I did today. So get rid of it that way. Thank you for being here.
I'm not even I came here. My name's Virginia Estes. I'm representative of Estes Ranch Ltd. One of our major pieces of property is the half section on the immediate north side of Green Tree Country Club. As a family, we are opposed to the extraterritorial jurisdiction. We have enough government regulation trying to regulate our business as it is. At this particular point, we cannot have a new septic tank. Legally, I cannot shoot a rattlesnake. So consequently, all of my family carries very sharp hose. My brother is a deputy sheriff, and one of his lifetime goals has always been to arrest his oldest sister. On a very serious note, our neighbors have been good to us, and we have been good to our neighbors. The Faskins, the Cowdens, the Scarbers, the Esteses. We are all perfectly capable of deciding how to develop and if we want to develop our property. Some of us prefer to be mineral owners only. Some of us prefer to develop our surface. Having lived in Lubbock for 13 years and had an oil well 2.5 blocks from me, I'm not sure why we have this resistance to drilling inside the city limits. We are opposed to the supermajority rule, and we do support an orderly cooperation in drilling within the Midland city limits.
Thank you very much. All right. Hi.
My name is Steve Pruitt. I'm a resident of 1 Lazywood Lane in Midland. I appreciate the opportunity to speak on behalf of Legacy Reserves. We're a company that was founded in 2005 with its roots back to 1981 with Dale Brown's company. And I speak on behalf of our employees and directors, which include Kerry Brown, Chairman and CEO, and Kyle McGraw, EVP and Director. We've grown from 12 employees in 2005 to over 100 employees today, and 50 of those work about 2 blocks from here. We have about in excess of 5,000 investors to whom we distributed about $65 million of distributions over the last year. We operate in the Permian Basin. About 70% of our production is here. We've been active in drilling in the Wolfberry Play, southwest of Midland and due west of Midland. We have been very active acquiring reserves. We've consummated over 40 acquisitions, over $500 million since 2005. That's created our growth and opportunities to create employment for people in Midland, Texas. We have 4 40-acre Wolfberry locations just straddling 191 just west of here that would be in the extraterritorial jurisdiction. So this will affect us. We are opposed to the provisions of the ordinance that would create regulations in the ETJ. We feel that's overreaching the City Council's authority. We are also opposed to provisions that would restrict spacing to 80 acres in the ETJ. We feel spacing is the responsibility of the Texas Railroad Commission that's functioned very well for almost a century in regulating this industry that's put Midland on the map, and it's served as a model for regulatory bodies of oil and gas resources across the world. We would humbly ask the council to send the provisions or the ordinances back to the task force
to collect the comments. We appreciate your collecting the comments today, and it sounds like more will be forthcoming electronically. We'll be happy to submit ours as well. It would be very disappointing to see the ordinance adopted as it is written today. It smacks of regulations that many of us have become familiar with in Santa Fe, New Mexico, which amount to a restriction on drilling at all in Santa Fe County, but also make it uneconomic to drill in New Mexico. Texas has been a haven for oil and gas development, and again has supported our schools, our churches, and our new hospital, and we hope that you all will consider making changes that will render a lot of the development in and around Midland uneconomic. Thank you very much.
Hello, my name is Javed Anwar. We operate under Midland Energy Inc. Currently, we have been drilling a well north of town, which is east of the cemetery, and we have first-hand experience under the current regulation. We are spending over and above what we drill is $300,000 to $400,000 extra on drilling and completion this well. After studying the new proposed regulation, we feel like it will take another 15 months to get approvals, and it may increase the drilling and completion cost up to $600,000. I think so you should reconsider and rewrite the new regulations, which would consider unnecessary burden on the oil companies, which I don't have the time to go into, like fencing. Don Hale can talk about it. But anyway, there are a lot of people. I just like to see the hand of oil and gas people and their industry, that, you know, the support of our industry. I just like to see how many people are here. Just
how many Midlanders are here? Let's all raise our hand.
well,
I think we're really all trying to do what's good for our
I just like
community.
to show
I
you,
understand.
City Council, how many people work in the oil industry and how many support the oil industry, you know,
Yes.
and how much livelihood is based on that. Thank you, Mayor.
Good job. Thank you, sir. Yeah.
Don Hale, 5503 Sundance Court. I just wanted to speak about health and safety. You know, we're aware that we want to be safe on these locations. We want to build fences around them. As far as mission stone or brick fence, that's not going to be any safer than a chain link or cyclone fence around these locations. It's going to be about $100,000 more expensive than the chain link or cyclone fence. If our issues are health and safety, let's make that our issue, not aesthetics, and base our new ordinance on the health and safety issues. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Hale. Appreciate you.
Good afternoon. My name is John Lozano. I live at 4510 Wilshire Drive. Just want to say that I've been in the service industry, you know, for the oil field my entire life. I've worked around pumping units and you know, batteries, and I don't think they're an eyesore at all. I think when I see one of these pumping units going up and down, that just means that I'll be able to provide for my family. You know, right now, you know, we've done some work on the south side, on the west side of Midland. I don't see anything being different drilling on the north side. I work for SOC Industries. We're a trucking company. We've done work with several operators and oil producers. Anything that drives up the cost of letting them do their business is, you know, going to cost us in terms of being able to do the work, you know, for them, being able to do at a, you know, a cost where it benefits them but benefits us also. I deal on a daily basis with guys coming in looking for a job every day, and I got to turn these guys away because we can't grow our company any bigger because we can't, you know, when there's not enough work out there to provide any more jobs for the guys coming through the door. I just, you know, want to request the council to keep in mind the everyday families, everyday guys like me, they're trying to do, you know, provide for the family, and keep in mind that anything y'all do to, you know, drop the cost of the oil producers is going to cost, you know, my family, my livelihood, you know, directly. I have some of my guys came with me that work with me that want to speak, you know, about their families, about their experiences living here in Midland, and to say, you know, just keep in mind the families of everyday people like me that live in Midland. They do deal with everyday issues like safety and the health of our company and our guys that they're out there trying to do the job for everybody. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. Yes, sir. Glad you're here today. Thank you for being
My name is Noel Barrentis, and I live in 2800 Maxwell here in Midland, Texas. I just moved here about 2 years ago when this oil field was doing real good. And unfortunately, when it went back down, I was affected by it. And when I got affected by it, I went and looked for a job everywhere else, and I couldn't find one. Because once the oil goes down, everything else goes down. And it affects everybody, and I just want to... I'm kind of nervous here.
Yeah, you're doing a great job. Just smile.
But,
It's good.
I'm all for
You're
the
doing
drilling.
great.
Drill, baby, drill.
All right, thank you. That's pretty profound for a guy that's just been here a couple of years. Thank you. Yes, sir.
My name is Joe Martinez. I reside at 4304 Versailles. I just want to say that with the continued drilling that has happened has allowed me to keep my employment, and during the slow quarters of this year I was able to buy my first home, and thank you.
That's great. Thank you very much, sir. Appreciate you staying there. Yeah, it is a bit intimidating to come down here if you've never done it before, so I admire your courage. Martha, it's easy for you, so.
No, it's
I'm sorry.
not in this crowd.
Yeah.
I'm Martha Manulik. I live at 1408 West Cuthbert and work for Legacy Real Estate. And my husband is an operator, and I hear firsthand the restrictions and the onerous regulations put on him as he tries to meet those requirements. But I also work in real estate, and I hear from our commercial realtors and our developers the onerous regulations that are put on them. And when commercial realtors go out and build a shopping center now, they're required to put in so many trees. There's a lot of regulation that comes from the city that adds cost. But in the long run, it improves the look of our city. And so I don't think either side is, everybody in the world these days is regulated. I think what we have to decide as a community is, I represent a lot of people who aren't mineral owners. Their only asset is their home. And at this point, the way it stands is I could sell somebody their home, and if oil goes to $150 a barrel, it becomes very lucrative to go into those neighborhoods and buy people's homes up and put a drilling rig right there. And that is feasible under the current ordinance. Well, what I guess we have to decide is, do we feel like, as a homeowner, having a drilling rig next to your home does in fact raise your property value or lower it? And if we feel that it has some negative impact on our property values, we have to protect those people too. And so I think what I'm asking for is not that we do anything to penalize our oil industry, because it's been incredibly good to Midland in every aspect. What I think we need to know is, what's the plan? Because if you tell me that I'm supposed to sell property to somebody, they come in and put a drilling rig next to it, and as Mr. Davis suggested, they should just file a suit with the state, you won't be getting those phone calls. The real estate agents and the city council are going to be getting those phone calls. Why did you let this happen to me? I know the situation next to the cemetery, there were people who had spent money based on what they were required to do. They had a lot of outlay of cash, and because of the way the ordinance is designed, somebody came in the middle of that, and that investment was gone. So it's not that we want to penalize anybody. I think what we need is a fair playing field so everybody knows what to expect. And if what to expect is it's wide open, it should be wide open, that the oil industry do it and let the Railroad Commission regulate it, we need to know that, because that will impact investment on the real estate side of it. So we need to find something that works for both sides so that we all know how we're going to move forward on this. Thank you.
Good job. Thank you. Yes, sir.
Hello, my name is Jimmy Wright. I live at 5212 Mathis, and I'm just here kind of to speak on behalf of myself and my family. We recently moved to Midland a couple years ago, and we bought a house in a neighborhood that is being developed as we speak. My personal thoughts are, when I bought that house and I bought that property in a neighborhood that was undeveloped, I knew that it was subject to a mineral reservation. When a developer buys a large piece of property to develop a subdivision, they either purchase the mineral estate or they don't. They either know that it is subject to an existing oil and gas lease or it is not. My contention would be there has to be some level of personal responsibility put on the individuals to make the business decision whether it's prudent for them to go acquire those leasehold rights to make sure that the leasehold does not get developed so that way they can build their subdivision as they please, or they run the risk of having an operator under the existing laws, complying with the Railroad Commission, to come in and develop, and that's a risk that individuals are forced to take. I also, on the other side, don't think it is reasonable to expect a surface owner to acquire 67% of the mineral owner's permission to use their surface as they see fit, and it complies with either the city ordinances or the extraterritorial jurisdiction. I think that's an unreasonable burden being put on surface ownership rights. As a landman, I have to track down people, and let me tell you, sometimes finding 67% of the people can be a pretty difficult task just to find out who they are. So I do think that there are issues in the proposed ordinance that are affecting both sides, and I do think that part of the give and take of it is that nobody's going to be 100% happy. But I do think we need to keep in mind that while the individuals buy these properties, they're realtors. I know I had a very good realtor who explained to me up front, she said, they can drill an oil well right next door to you because you do not own these minerals. You do not own the right to keep them from doing that. And if I wanted to spend the cash to acquire those leasehold rights to keep that from happening, then that was my responsibility to do that. And I think that needs to be maintained as a part of the discussion. Is it's not like this stuff is just held out and they have no opportunity to acquire it to protect their surface or mineral interests, vice versa. Thank you.
Good job.
Hi, I'm Leslyn Wallace, 200 Blackberry Circle. Ladies and gentlemen of Midland, members of the task force, City Council, and Mr. Mayor, thank you for allowing me to address you today. I'm here because I am a resident and a taxpayer, but I'm also very concerned about the unintended consequences that may result if the proposed ordinances are approved as currently written. We realize that the task force had a monumental task when they began rewriting the ordinance, and it's unfortunate that more oil and gas industry personnel weren't involved from the onset. But we're here now. Frankly, many of us never expected an ordinance that was so anti-oil and gas and to be the result, and frankly, we didn't know what we were facing until we saw the draft.
That's good. Yeah, keep going.
The drilling ordinance establishes 3 levels of bureaucracy, which will serve only to slow down the permitting process. It places unwarranted notice requirements on the oil and gas operator, applies excessive application fees, and requires superfluous letters of credit and certificates of deposit from the operators. These are in addition to what's currently required from the Texas Railroad Commission. The drilling ordinance also contains 38 on-site requirements. 38. I don't have time to list everyone today, but we too will be emailing our statements regarding those requirements. And most of them serve no real purpose other than exponentially increasing the time and the cost to the oil operator. Producers are already bound by Texas Railroad Commission regulations, which provide adequate solutions to those 38 requirements. The ordinance contains onerous fencing and landscaping requirements. These do not serve to promote health and safety. A cinder block fence may hide a pump jack, but it also hides anything or anybody who may end up on the wrong side of that fence. This presents a safety hazard to the citizens of Midland and to the oil producer, not to mention the $100,000 of additional costs. Drilling in and around the city will provide immediate tax revenue to the city, county, and hospitals and schools that we've discussed, and it will continue to provide jobs in Midland. We recognize that there are those who may argue that one well per 80 acres will not provide as much tax revenue as the same number of homes, or as the number of homes that will fill that same 80 acres. But I ask you this, are the permits prepared for the development? Are plans ready for the homes that would be built? Are the lots sold? Is ground ready to be broken? Unless we double the size of Midland overnight, I think that's probably not the case. But we stand here ready to drill today and start providing that tax revenue. Oil and gas real estate development and real estate development can work together, and we've got models in the city of Lubbock and Odessa that show us that we can coexist. I'm just asking respectfully that you go back to the drawing board, look at the Henry proposal for the rewrite of the ordinances that you have, and please reconsider. I want to ask one thing. Have you tried to put a face on these big bad oil companies that are trying to disfigure the city of Midland? The real face of Midland is the independent producer made up of second, third, and fourth generations of Midlanders, along with those who have made the choice to come to West Texas in search of black gold. Look around you. It's the passionate, the young and old, landowners, engineers, geologists, landmen, with that entrepreneurial spirit of becoming an oil man, all of whom live, worship, volunteer, provide jobs, and support this great community. I've now been a Midland resident for 25 years, and that's by choice. And I can unequivocally say that the face of West Texas is oil and gas. Pump jacks silhouetted against beautiful sunsets are Midland. These ordinances may be an attempt to give Midland a facelift, but it's her wrinkles, the pump jacks, the pipelines, the tank batteries that are a constant reminder of what built her and who we are. You can try to cover them up with cinder block fences and evergreen trees, but when all the facelifting is done, it's still the same city, and the oil people are still here. Darrell Royal once said, "I dance with the one that brung me." Are you dancing with the one that brung you? Thank you.
All right, Ted?
I'm Ted Collins, and I've been here 46 years. I'm an oil and gas guy. I moved here because there was a lot of opportunity here. This was the Wild West, and you had a chance to come out here and make a good living, and it's all oil. And it surprises me a little bit. And Midland County isn't the biggest oil producer. Ector County, Andrews County, Gaines County, they're blessed with more oil and less people, so they've got better schools in some instances. They've got their roads in good shape. Well, we've gotten blessed recently, too. We've got an oil field right under us. We didn't expect it. It wasn't commercial. It was the world's largest uneconomical oil field. It was drilled for tax reasons mainly. I drilled my first Sprayberry well in 1964 in Reagan County. It's still producing, still pays a small amount of money. We've tried to attract a lot of different industry here. We haven't had a lot of success. We've offered them tax abatements, tax incentives, given them property, and done a lot of things. Well, we've got an industry that's ready. We've got the oil business. I'm afraid we'll always be an oil industry. The oil industry itself is under a lot of attack in Washington with taxes and regulations, and even here and more. I'm an active person in the Barnett Shale and drilled 77 wells in the Alliance Airport area, in areas that are as affluent, houses as good as any of we've got here. Under the airport, on the fair, they're drilling Meacham Field in Fort Worth, where I grew up. They've shut down runways to drill on it. It's where they do not have restrictive things like we have. They've got some restrictions, but they don't restrict that and cause you to spend more money. This oil field, prices are where they are. It was a lot better a year ago, obviously. Drilling costs are down, and we can drill this oil field now economically. If we fiddle around too long, prices of drilling may go up, oil may go down, and we're going to miss our opportunity for the biggest tax items that you'll ever have. It'll cure a lot of the problems we have now of freezes on employment, freezes on raises. These other cities, it has done wonders for Fort Worth, for Cleburne, for Weatherford. I've drilled in all those towns. It hasn't been a problem. There haven't been accidents. Everybody's happy. I just say it's kind of, everybody's had great points here, and I recognize the passion on both sides of this argument. It can be done and work together. I just think I'm a little disappointed that we're the oil capital of this state, and we're saying, you all are saying in a way, not in my backyard. I certainly ask you to reconsider that. Thank you.
Mr. Collins? Mark, I assume your points you didn't get to make it the first time, so we'll let you get back.
I appreciate that.
Yes, sir, thanks.
I would like to start with, I think most of the things on that 38-item list are probably in the current oil and gas ordinance. There is language in the current ordinance talking about 80 and 40 acre spacing. I agree that I don't think we need to lock into definite spacing, because if 80 is what it takes today, I think there's technology that very easily could get it down. I would love to see the minerals produced not only at 40 acre spacing, but 20 acre spacing. If we can figure a way to do that and minimize the damage to the surface on it, then that certainly works as a win-win situation. So I would ask you, I would stand with them on the fact that I don't think we need to legislate what the spacing is. The 67%, really the things that, to me, that are changed today is if oil and gas gets brought through the planning process, yes, there's a additional burden, and there's language of the 40 acre spacing. We've heard my association say that, yes, we're supportive of this ordinance. That's mainly if all of us are going through the planning process. Right now, it's no doubt that a developer and a builder goes through the planning process, and there's some loopholes in the language right now that seems to me could leave that open. And as we look at the ways to do that, Windsor's legal representative came forth. They're showing what the Spirit of Midland can do. They permitted a couple of wells on the airport that are actually where the surface is half a mile off of where they're actually looking to produce it. And that's the can-do spirit of Midland. Not the can't-do, I want the status quo, but looking at the sky and see how high we can fly. I thank you once again.
Oh, thanks, Mark. All right. All right, the line is empty. Is there anyone else that wants to speak to this issue? Well, come on up. Yep.
I'm Joe Fagan, and I live at 1000 Pecan, and I just wanted to make one statement. I represent about 11% ownership under DFW Airport for gas contracts, and they handle the pipelines and the drilling under that. They've had no trouble. They've drilled about 150 wells, some of them right by the loading facilities, all up and down the freeways or loading areas. They haven't had this kind of problem, so I just thought I might mention that.
Thank you, Mr. Fagan. Appreciate you. Thank you very much.
My name is Joel Castello. I reside at 4801 Rustic Trail.
If you want to, if you want to pull that off, you can do that, or move it up. There you go. Thanks, Joe.
I work for Endeavor Energy Resources, a large independent here in town. We'll drill about 150 to 160 wells this year, mainly in the Wolfberry or the Sprayberry. I'm really speaking on my behalf. My employer hasn't asked me to come up here or say anything, but I believe that we can orderly and safely and economically drill in and around the city of Midland. I think we've demonstrated that with the well north of the city. That well did, however, cost probably 25 to 30% more than it otherwise would have cost. I would just ask you to consider the mineral estate and not to cause us not to be able to drill wells because of onerous regulations and additional cost. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Castello. Appreciate you. Thanks. Javid?
How you doing?
Good. How are you doing?
All right.
We're having a ball.
I just want to answer the question regarding what Windsor is doing in Oklahoma City, or what Mr. Payne said. I wish we can pump these wells from one pad. It will save us a lot of surface location, building locations, and roadways. Wolfberry starts from anywhere from 7,000 plus, goes all the way down to 10,900. It's very hard to pump these wells. These are pumping wells. These are not flowing wells. We have to put the rods and tubing in, and if we pump those wells in a directional direction, we will probably pulling those wells every month. That will cost anywhere from $30,000 to $50,000. Add to the $30,000 to $50,000 per month operating cost. In addition, I heard a comment that there are operators who have left the location very filthy, dirty, or whatever. I have not seen those pictures. You can call the Railroad Commission. They'll come out and impose a fine and make the operator clean those. So everybody is not a bad operator. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Anwar. Thank you.
I'm J.D. Crawford, 1401 Garden City Highway.
It's good to see you, Mr. Crawford.
I've been in Midland since 1932. I've seen
a few changes, maybe?
It's a few changes here.
Yes, sir.
And I like it here. But I've seen oil at $10 a barrel, and I had property that I couldn't give away. And I've seen oil at $150 a barrel. And man, I moved some of the property then. I've got some open land that I'd like to see drilled on. It's in the city limits. And I'd like to say that let's remember what our roots are, that where the money is, and what causes the economy to grow, and that's oil business. And I'd like to see the drilling on my place. And
well, there's some oil operators here. Maybe make a deal in the back, like they used to do at the Scarborough Hotel.
Talked to some of them like that, but we need to get it where that it's not so expensive to drill in the city limits. And I'd just like to say, remember this, and let's try to make it where the operators can drill, and because I'd sure like to see that land develop. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Crawford. Appreciate you. He's one of those guys we were talking about earlier about vision. He's got a great legacy. Yes, sir.
Yeah, my name's Johnny Barra. I live at 8,000 Dunblane Drive in Midland, Texas. I just want to start out by saying I was born and raised in West Texas, and there's nobody loves the oil industry more than I do. There's no doubt about it. It's a great business to be in, and it's provided a lot of good things for people's families and communities. What I'm here for, though, is to talk about drilling rigs right next door to you. It's all about perspective, whether you're riding a horse or you're cleaning up behind it. And, a lot of times the guys that are living next door to the drilling rigs or the oil wells are the ones that are cleaning up behind it. I've been president of Saddle Club Ranch Estates for a couple of years previous to right now, and we've lived with past wells on our property in our little community that we have out there, and nobody, like I said, is more supportive of the oil and gas industry. It's just that. It's like once they drill the well, they're gone, and they don't want nothing to do with the people that live in and around these oil wells. And when you try to go to the Railroad Commission, we've been fighting this for a long time, and you've got the pictures of the company there that we've dealt with. My wife has called the Railroad Commission on several occasions. They're just no teeth. Nothing ever gets done. We live in a pretty nice area out there, and we have building restrictions for homeowners out there, and we can't even get. In no fashion does this this oil well location even want to or come close to meeting our building restrictions, much less the fact that they maintain the area and keep the weeds down from it. So I guess what I'm asking is, when you make your ordinance, I would love to see it retroactive to wells that are already in place, but you've got to have some kind of teeth for the guy that's paying property taxes out there that can't get anything done at the level with the oil company. We have no recourse but to come to you and say, look, this is not right. We need some help. And that's what we need. We need some help here. Thank you.
Very good. Thanks, sir. All right, anybody else? Dennis, good to see you. Thank you.
Thanks. I'm Dennis Johnson, live at 3605 Woodhaven Court, for 17 years there, but over 30 years in Midland, and have Summit Petroleum, and we are active in owning some of the interests that are subject to your hearing and your regulations. I think that y'all have heard enough information today, both from surface owners and home builders and from oil companies, that there are a number of issues that you might want to revisit. And I would just ask that you please take that into consideration with all of the comments that are here, and look at the Lubbock regulations, the Odessa regulations. There are ways that the oil and gas industry can work well with the other public and surface issues. And if you pioneer your own regulation and you put things in there that are not in these other statutes, you might have unintended consequences that aren't good either for the city itself or for the oil companies or maybe for the surface owners. So I would just ask that you try to relook and maybe come more off of an established precedent like we have in Odessa and Lubbock. Thank y'all for your consideration.
Thank you very much. All right. All right, who else? All right, I'm going to call it to a close here if I don't see anybody coming up. All right, we're going to close that public hearing, and we have one more. I think a lot of the comments, I don't know that it'll be any different, but I do need to read it. And say at approximately 3:05 p.m. or what time is it now? 4:30 or 5:30, whatever. At approximately 3:05 p.m., the Midland City Council will hold a public hearing in the Midland Center, 105 North Main Street, Midland, Texas, to discuss and receive public input on a proposed ordinance regulating development plats in the city limits and the city's extraterritorial jurisdiction pursuant to Chapter 212 of the Texas Local Government Code. And I know that we had some comments earlier about the ETJ, and so if there are comments that have not been voiced up until this point, you're more than welcome to come forward at this time and speak to that issue. I don't see anybody, so I guess we'll close that public hearing. And yeah, I'll open it up if you have one more comment. I'm sorry. I didn't see your hand there go up.
A little nervous earlier.
Joe
Martinez did a better job than I did. And
he did a lot better job than I did, so don't feel bad about it.
I'm probably the only one from outside Midland speaking here today. I know this is primarily a local issue, but I'm here because I don't know that there's any individual company that's affected more by the ETJ. Windsor has on the books right now, we plan to drill 24 wells in Midland County next year. And most of those would be in an area affected by the ETJ. And we have 40-acre wells spaced out there right now. So that would eliminate roughly half of those locations, taking our expenditure from something on the order of $35 million down to $15, $16 million. And, you know, Midland's always had a place in my heart. I travel here from Wichita Falls, and I love it here because it's just like Wichita Falls. It's a hotbed of independent activity, and somebody with a few dollars in their pocket and an idea can make a difference. And I think that's the ability to become part of this juggernaut that we call the U.S. economy is what's important. And I like to see the ability to continue to do that.
All right.
Thank you.
Thanks, sir. Good job. All right. Anybody else? All right, well, I'm going to close the public hearing then, and I don't know if any of the council members want to make any comments. I don't necessarily know if anybody wants to say anything about that. I'm not here to see anybody. What do you? I don't want to force anyone. I just wanted to give you guys a chance to. Here, you say what you're going to say.
I said I think our next step is just to go process all the information that we've been given today, which is quite a bit.
And Mayor, I was just going to thank everybody for being here. This is a very, very significant part of what I consider to be the legislative process. And you know, there are 7 folks up here, so who knows? It's a flip of a coin as to where this might end up or where it might go. But I do know, working with my peers on the council for the time that I have. This group is so committed to doing what is right and what is best for Midland that I can assure everybody in the audience that's going to be the outcome. It may not be what we all agree with, but the outcome will be what this body thinks is the best and greatest for Midland and its future and our children and everything like that. So again, I just want to thank everybody for being here and being part of this process. It's so critical.
Yeah, hit that button.
Thank the task force also for their good job. They put a lot of time and effort and took a lot of criticism, good and bad. And I agree with, concur with Councilman James that our council has put a lot of time and much more time than I have. They've been working on it for 3 years. But I heard a lot of people say that they're homegrown, and I am too. And I think that we're all, council, task force, everybody, just wants to make sure that the vision for Midland is good and protected. And I'm in retail. I'm a enchilada flipper. And, you know,
Good one at that.
I have to keep my seats full. And, of course, we need the oil and gas. That's the infrastructure. And we want to protect that. And so, you know, I kept hearing that we're trying to take the oil and gas out, or we're hurting them or harming them. And I don't remember any of my colleagues talking that way. It's no intentions at all. It's just to protect the gateways and the vision of Midland, to continue that quality of life, and also to make sure that the oil and gas is there and that we do the right thing to ensure that you don't pay these high fees and everything that's been mentioned today. So thank you all for showing up today.
Yeah, that's very good. And I'll just close it by saying I again want to think about where we want to be. We want to have a Midland that's better and our future is brighter. So as we go through it, and I'm not quite sure what the next step's going to be, the council has talked about having another executive session next week and giving us a little time to process the comments we've heard today and wrestle with some of this. There is a thought that we could bring back the task force, and I believe it's really better at this level now, at the council level. We've heard all the comments, we've heard all the discussion, and I hope that you trust that we're going to do the best thing for Midland. And I can't guarantee what it's going to look like. I don't know. I'm still wrestling in my own mind about what we need to really do as a community. But I do think this is a decision that the council is going to make. And so if you feel, and I know you do, passionate about a particular thing or items like Henry's presenting, give us that information. And then as we go through the, I guess after this executive session again next week, then we could start a voting process as early as the 27th of October. And there are 3 more remaining meetings this year for City Council, and there has to be a first and a second reading. And my hope would be we would have this complete by the end of this year. So we would, again, look at trying to compile all the comments that were made, and again, I don't know what it's going to look like. I think that the task force did an incredibly good job, and having everybody in the room at the same time, listening to all the different perspectives is very, very helpful, so that we can really come to some conclusion, and we will rely on the task force expertise and then individuals that are here in this room to try to make the best decision we can. So that's what I believe is going to happen. We'll have some more conversation about that next week, but we could have a reading for the first reading in October, and then the second reading in November, or vice versa. You'll have a meeting, the first reading in November, and then a second reading by December. So we just again have 3 more meetings. So hopefully, I'm looking around, seeing some furrowed brows and not really smiles, but I think again, keep it in your mind that we need to be remembering that we're looking out for what's best for Midland, and we don't need to be afraid of anything, because ultimately it'll be a good thing for Midland, and we will figure that out. And so, again, I appreciate each one of you coming, for your input, for standing up with courage to give us your words. And if you have particular items, email them to us, call us, track us down at HEB or whatever that is, because we want to be representative of what's best for Midland. And I think that forums like this, public hearings like this, just create the perfect opportunity for that. So, again, thank you, each one of you, for being here. Blessings. All right. With that, we'll be adjourned.